Hello, everyone. My name is Moshe Naveh from the SAP community team. Welcome to our SAP community call about how to search and find information about SAP Cloud SDK. We have Jordan and Artem from the SAP Cloud SDK team, development team.
Hello from my side. This is Jordan, developer advocate of the Cloud SDK team. And today with me, I have Artyom, our product owner. And thanks for introducing Moshe. And thanks everyone for joining. Like the title says, we will show how to search and find information about Cloud SDK. And of course, it's a technical session. So we will give a short demo of something that you might have seen, but you also might learn something new today. So stay tuned. And next slide, please. Before we get started, as usual, please note that we are not doing any official statements today. So any forward-looking statements that you might see in our slide are not official, and they're only for demonstration purposes. Please make your investing and project decisions based on what's available today. All right, as usual, we want to provide a brief update about what's new with the Cloud SDK, what happened recently. And probably the biggest highlight is, of course, the S4HANA release that we had this month. And actually, it was two releases of S4HANA. First of all, S4HANA Cloud did the 2011 release, so that we from the Cloud SDK, of course, delivered the client libraries for Java and JavaScript right away. So everything out of the box here. And additionally, on the Java side, we started also delivering on-premise libraries, meaning that now you can use the out-of-the-box Java library of the Cloud SDK to access also S4HANA on-premise systems. Especially, we released a new one for the 2020 version of S4HANA on-premise. And of course, this one will be available so for the future, meaning that, as you know, on-premise systems might stay around a little bit longer in a given version. So the version 2020 will be, of course, supported even when newer versions are arriving. On the JavaScript side, we also have released a new client library for S4HANA Cloud, released 2011. And we also introduced some improvements here, especially noteworthy that we adjusted the signature and convenience of some of our methods so that they also accept arrays wherever this was possible. This is changed. And another good improvement is that we managed to remove one of our dependencies, which is Lambda in this case. And by doing this, we are actually saving around 10% of the size of the dependency. So this is around 2 megabytes now. The saving is around 2 megabytes. But still, it's a significant amount, as you see. 10% of the SDK size is a good saving here. So once you update to the new version, you can, of course, clean up your node modules. All right, next slide. What we will be talking about today, of course, we want to guide you through our information sources, and one of the biggest and the most important source of information is our documentation portal. We will start with that one, and after that, we will go through the usage of the client libraries and some common questions that we get from developers using the SDK, and of course using the generator. And here we'll see a very small demo, and I will explain in more detail what exactly happens there and how to look up the right the right information on generated services. And last but not least, we will also go through our contribution and feedback possibilities that we provide, and maybe in some more details on the documentation portal, what we did there. We hope that you like it. And with that, I'm handing over to Artyom to warm you up with the documentation portal introduction. Your stage.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Artem. I'm a product owner of Cloud SDK. And I think many of you already know that we launched a brand new documentation portal in early March. Like it was launched actually in May to public, but we started to work on it in March 2020. And it was, you can imagine, a great effort. Because before that, you could find information about SDK everywhere, scattered across SAP, like on the developers.sap.com, on the community page, in the blogs, and in the tutorials. But all this information was not collected in one source, was not well organized, and some of that became outdated without you knowing about that. So with SDK getting more popular, we understood that we need a source of information which will help you guys just use our product from the ground up easily and effectively. So we started to think that we need a documentation portal for you. And we decided to make it open source and moved because SDK has a very quick and dynamic development cycle. It's not hosted even on SAP resources, but on GitHub. And as we like to joke between the team, we are just 1% done because it's a great effort that is completely ongoing. So this way we want to show that this effort is just started and will be continued. And we are 100% committed actually to give you all information you need to develop with SAP Cloud SDK in the cloud, in the SAP Cloud. And probably one of the most important things to note from this presentation and to be your takeaway is that currently documentation portal is the single source of truth about SAP Cloud SDK. There are many other sources about which you perfectly know, and we even refer to them from the documentation. But if you want to have the most fresh, most up-to-date version of the documentation and information, please use the documentation portal. And telling that it was just started doesn't mean it's not there. It's fully there for you. It's fully fledged documentation portal that contains, I would say, 80% of information about probably 90% of the most used things in the SDK. And one of the things we would ask you to do is actually tell us what are those 20% things that you still want us to document and to know about SAP Cloud SDK. I also want to tell you how we do the documentation and why you should trust it and why you should use it. Because it's actually documentation is code. So there is a repository where we just write documentation the same way developers would write code. We update it like with increments, with small increments, making just commits and pull requests and reviewing them and getting them delivered to you almost immediately after that. And we decided to start with essentials because you can imagine it's a titanic job to document everything. So we thought, what would developer need from documentation to get things done, and that are essentials. And of course, we add in stuff and more like wide information for you when we are going. We also made it a part of a definition of done for every feature we now release with SDK. So when we advertise something in release notes, in 99% of the cases, you will already have it documented on the documentation portal. We write so it's a documentation from developers, for developers, and written by developers. So we crowdsourced it with the team, and those people that write the code, they actually then document it for you. And I think it's making this knowledge simply invaluable. Yeah, as I mentioned, it's continuously updating. So coming to the documentation today and tomorrow, you might notice that some structure has changed, or you will find new code snippets that you can directly use in your IDE. So please visit it when you think that something is not there. It will be there soon. We also update documentation with everything that comes to us from you to support. So for example, you're asking us how to use some specific SAP service for which we generate a type-safe client, or you want to know how to leverage our advanced capabilities like caching or resilience, and some small subtle details that are missing from the docs, and then we answer you in support. We immediately follow up and put it into documentation so that next time you can find it there and don't have to go to ask those questions again and wait for the results. And of course, it's open source, so you're very welcome to visit our repository. And if you find something that is not true, or you think something can do better, please go ahead and make the world better by contributing. And just to give you an idea how we wanted to prove for ourselves that we are doing the right job, we started to track the information and the documentation portal. And this is, for example, a graph of Google searches related to our documentation. And you can see that starting from like June and till today, it's like always growing and bringing new insights from the Google search bar. So that's all the visits that you have just from Googling. So not something like even our visits wouldn't be to like our own visits to the documentation wouldn't be counted here. So that's I think impressive, and thanks you for searching for the information about the SDK. But to make it even better for you, we also track absolutely anonymously which pages do you visit and where do you spend the most time learning about the SDK. That's why we have this tracking installed, and we ask you to allow us to see what you're doing, because that's actually one of the things helping us improve. And this data from the like we have on average 2,000 visits per every 30 day as a running window. So that's enormous amount of information for us to know what you're looking for and to improve in the places where you most need it. And of course, it's probably too much of talking behind the slides. And for those of you who might not have yet seen it in action, I will just show you how our documentation is structured and works so that you a little bit better understand our ideas behind it. So this is an entry page, straightforward and simple. And from here, you'll see the top bar, which will give you the most important links, I think, to the documentation itself, to the About SAP Cloud SDK section. And here I would say that this is the least complete at the moment, because we think that actual features and code snippets are the most meaningful and essential thing. But we are also going to provide you with the feature matrix and other information that summarizes a lot of concepts about how SDK work. We started to do this. But compared to, for example, Java or JavaScript SDK features information, it's yet not to the level we would like to want it. So from here, you can also quickly jump to the relevant SDK section. If you write in Java, click here, you end up in Java section. Same for JavaScript. So easy and straightforward. For those of you who visit the first time, maybe getting started would also work perfectly. It will land you in the overview section. And of course, we have a pipeline which will also navigate you right where you need. Also, you can quickly access our support channels, and this is available to quickly ask us questions. And release notes, because when you learned everything that like you need on your daily basis, but you miss some feature and you want to monitor it, then I think that at the beginning, Jordan presented nicely what's new in the SDK, but you don't need that presentation quite often because you can go here and search for yourself, find our Java doc, for example, for Java release block, access to the packages hosted on the package repository, Maven Central in this case, and all the information for all the releases. You can also see the bar on the right side that will guide you through these headings, and you can choose the specific release and see all the information about it. I think it's quite neat functionality. And basically the structure is quite straightforward. So by the way, just a quick hint, we have a night mode, but for presentation, I think it's not the best. But for your eyes, it can save you if you prefer to work in the evenings. So the structure is quite simple. So you have a sidebar, which is on the left. And here you will have the flavors of the SDK like Java and JavaScript. These are the places where you will land the most. And I think the most important part is the features. So you will see all the features like OData, our REST, BAPIs, connectivity, multi-tenancy. And it, of course, depends on the SDK flavor that you use and how many features you will have there. But that's where you find most information in the structure form. You can also use our search bar. You actually can use it even from here. So it's like a smart search. So you just, you can see your recent searches. And in case I search for OData, I will see a lot of results that would navigate me probably quickly exactly to where I want to find my information. And you will also see the segments. Like, for example, we have video tutorials, and there are a couple of about OData. We have it in JavaScript, we have it in Java. So after clicking, you just end up in the section you are most probably looking for. Don't underestimate it, and I really recommend, if you have an idea to ask some question in support, first visiting the search bar and trying out to find something there. Also, I think Jordan will show it a little bit later, but for the API reference, our documentation for JavaScript is looking like this. And here you have a separate search bar to search for specifically API documentation. I think that's about it, and that does it. There are a lot of other resources like information about our community calls like we're having today. So you can review other calls that we had. We have information about related projects we collaborate with. Here is information about our pipeline. And of course, overview section also grows. It answers some frequently asked questions. Actually, we have FAQ in all the SDKs to answer the relevant questions for that specific flavor of the SDK. And of course, we show you again in many places how to find support about our product, because we believe that great support actually makes it pleasure to use. And just a final bit. So if you go and visit the site like this, after some time, you will see the snippet to allow tracking. So please press this allow button to let us see what you search for in SDK, and then we will know how to improve it. Let me see if I covered what I wanted. I think that's pretty much it for this moment, and I will hand over to Jordan to quickly show you to search other valuable resources in the SDK. Jordan, it's your stage.
Thanks, Artyom. Thanks for showing the documentation portal. We will be using it a lot during the next few things that I want to show you. Next, I want to briefly recap something that you probably already know, but this is quite important to understand how the Cloud SDK works. That's why I want to show this diagram. We've shown it a couple of times before, and what we see here is, first of all, the two components that we have as part of the client libraries and core of Cloud SDK. We are offering support for JavaScript and for Java project. So this is the first main grouping that we have. But then within the libraries for Java and JavaScript, we also have some other grouping like displayed here. We are separating between the core library of Client SDK, of SAP Cloud SDK, the core library also containing the client library generator. This we have for Java and JavaScript. Secondly, we have some libraries for SAP products, especially for SAP S/4HANA Cloud, that we are delivering out of the box, meaning that if you decide to use Cloud SDK for an application that connects to SAP S/4HANA Cloud, then you can simply do it by including the dependency and start coding. And this you can do for both, for JavaScript and for Java. Recently, we started also delivering on-premise libraries. Like announced at the beginning of this call, there was a new release for SAP S/4HANA on-premise, and we are also delivering the client library for this one. And these client libraries you can use without any further action. So you simply include the dependency into your project, if it's Maven or NPM for the appropriate stack, and start coding. And the third component is the CLI component for JavaScript and CLI generator for Java. So the third component is something that allows you to do some basic things using the CLI without even having a project yet. And this separation is necessary for different reasons. Let's have a look at the JavaScript side. As you know, we developed the SAP Cloud SDK core as an open source project. We host it on github.com. We are doing the development there, and we follow the regular open source process. But when it comes to the client library for SAP S/4HANA Cloud, we are not open sourcing this one because we are not allowed to due to different policies that we have within SAP. And that's the reason we need this separation. That's why we have the separation of the open source component and the client library for SAP S/4HANA Cloud. But when it comes to hosting, we want to make it as easy as possible to developers to consume our product, which means that if you code in JavaScript, you most probably use NPM. And that's why we are delivering our open source part, which is the core library and the client library for SAP S/4HANA Cloud over the public NPM repository. And later, when you get the slides, you will see that you can click on these links here. So all of these components are links that will take you right away to the right section. So let's see this one. This is the npmjs.com, which means that here we are in a public NPM repository. And here you see that you can use the client library for SAP S/4HANA. We have 211 packages here that corresponds to services that are exposed by S/4HANA. And if you click one of the other links, you will end up in something similar like this, probably. Let me quickly change the search term here. So now you see that I changed the search term. Don't worry, you also have this one on the slide later. And I'm finding 6 packages, which are core, util, analytics, and so on. And these 6 packages are actually our core component, our core library for JavaScript. And when we have a look at the Java site, it looks quite similar. I'm clicking the last link here just to show you. It takes me to Maven Central, something that every Java developer knows quite well. This is one of the central Maven repositories hosting most of the libraries. And here I click the generator, and again, the link took me to this search term that is already encoded in the link. And as I click the generator, here I see actually 2 modules, which are Maven modules, one for OData generator and one for OData v4 generator. As you might think, the first one is for OData v2 and the second one for OData v4. And pretty standard here, we have Maven modules, meaning that they have jar, POM, and so on, like you are used to from every other Maven module. How to make sure that you are looking at the right and current versions. One way to do it is to simply have a look at the updated column. So right now, I knew exactly what I was looking for, but sometimes I might look for something like SAP Cloud SDK, and I see a lot of results. But if you have a look at the column here, you will be able to easily find out which ones are the current versions and which ones you should have a closer look at. This was the recap of our components and our libraries. And remember, we are trying to make your life as easy as possible. We are developers and we like developers. That's why we use the public NPM and Maven Central repositories to provide everything that you might need. Next one that I want to show you is, I want to talk a little bit about Java docs. And you remember we have 2 main libraries. The first one is the core library, and the second one is the client library for SAP S4HANA. And we, of course, provide Java docs for all of them. If I go to the documentation portal, like Artyom already said, let's jump into Java now, because we are talking about the Java doc. And looking at the navigation bar, we are in the Java section, which is quite cool. And here we can click on release notes. This is also something that Artyom already showed. And having a look at the latest version, for example, we see these links here: Java doc, release block, and Maven Central. By the way, if I click on Maven Central, I will automatically land on Maven Central with the right search term, showing me all the modules that are part of this release. But now I'm interested in Java docs, so I'm clicking it. And like every Java developer knows, this one is also pretty standard here. What we are looking at is the Java doc for the latest version that we can recognize here. And here we actually can do Control F to search different things. So we have all classes listed here. We don't need to expand anything. And we did it in this way so that you can easily search. So for example, let's try to look up the business partners service. So now I started typing business partners service. And I see that I have 12 hits here, 12 search results. And we see that we have the business partner service class. It even appears twice here. And you might ask yourself the question, why? Let's click the first one. So we see that this one is part of S4HANA data model or data services, which means that this is part of the client library for S4HANA. Let's click the second one. All right, like mentioned, we started delivering on-premise libraries as well. So here we see that this one is part of S4HANA on-premise version 2020 data model. And this is the difference. So this one is for the on-premise version, and this one is for the cloud version. Of course, we are looking at the client library for S4HANA, but we can find classes from the SAP Cloud SDK core library as well. And search would work in exactly the same way like this one. We will need it for the later demonstration that I want to show. By the way, I'm looking at the service now, which is the business partner service. And we see that this one is an interface. So you obviously cannot start coding with this one unless you implement it yourself, but we did this for you. And here you can see that all known implementation classes contain the default business partner service class, which you can instantiate and start coding. This was just a small detail here. All right, so now you know that in order to find a Java doc, you simply go to the documentation portal and click on release notes, where we have a listing of all the available versions. And for every version, you can access the Java doc for the given version. All right, let's have a look at the same for JavaScript. So if you are a JavaScript developer and are interested in the JavaScript doc, if you like, we call it API reference. You can also use the documentation portal for this. Switching over. Again, assuming that you start with the home page, you click on JavaScript and you click on API reference on the left. This one looks quite similar. If you ask yourself why this is different from the Java library, the reason for that is that on the Java library, we were using the release notes, if you remember. But since the JavaScript library is open source, we are using GitHub to host the release notes, which means that we are not having a copy of the release notes here. That's why we have only the listing of the versions. And this is also something that Artem already showed. I'm very briefly clicking to jump into it. This is the API reference for the latest version that I just clicked, which is 1.31.0. And we have this search button here at the top. So here you can start typing and searching. But now here is one more detail. We see that actually we only have the reference for these 6 modules here. And the number 6 is something that we already saw in this session. This is actually these 6 packages here. So what I just showed in the documentation portal was the API reference for our core library. And we have a second part, which is the client library for SAP S4HANA. And for that, we also provide client API references, which are also accessible over the documentation portal. And for that, I'm jumping over to the documentation portal again. So this is where we started. This is the API reference page where we accessed the API reference of the core library, right? And now we also have a release notes page here. And clicking on this one, give it a second to load. Still loading, like you see here at the top of the screen.
I think you can refresh, Jordan, and that should work.
Probably I should refresh, right? Okay. Now, thanks, Artyom. Now I clicked on this page and it worked. And we see here that we have this release notes page, which is actually containing the release notes of the pre-generated type-safe client libraries, which is exactly the SAP S/4HANA client library. And if you have a look at this box here, you see that for the open source SDK modules, which are the 6 ones that we saw previously, we maintain release notes on GitHub. And you can click here to review the appropriate release notes. So this page here is containing the release notes for the pre-generated client library for SAP S/4HANA. And the last release was this one. And here I have the link for API documentation. So this is how to find the API reference for a pre-generated SAP S/4HANA client library. And here you see that I have a lot of modules, right? This was over 200 modules that I had. So here I have all of them. All right, this was the small detail about how to find the API reference for Java and JavaScript. Next, I want to talk about coding. And when we code, we use SAP Cloud SDK to access different SAP systems, right? And let's start with SAP S/4HANA. Usually we have something like this. We have the API Business Hub. We look up some services there that we need to use. I'll show in a second how this works. And then after we have found a service, let's say we found the activity type service that we need to use in our project. Next thing we need to answer is, where is this service, right? Which Maven module do I need to import? Which NPM module contains the appropriate implementation? So that we need to go the path for Java, the upper one, and for JavaScript, the lower one. And you need to end up with either a Maven module, a class file, or NPM package. And how to do that? So the first question I want to address is how to find out which class file to use or which node module to use. And in order to do this, I will open the API Hub first, which is api.sap.com. I don't want to provide a very detailed introduction here, but on a high level, this is the API Hub that contains API specifications for different SAP products. Like you see here, S/4HANA Cloud, S/4HANA, CX, SuccessFactors, and others. And right now I'm interested in S/4HANA. That's why I'm clicking on the S/4HANA box. And here I see already all APIs of SAP S/4HANA. And in my example, we were looking at the activity type, which was this one. Let's quickly make sure that this is the right one. Yeah, A2X, right. So assuming that I need to use this service in my project, first thing I would do is to find the service here on API Hub, and then I would go into details, which is here, which will provide me some technical details here. And one thing that is interesting, especially with S4HANA services, is this service name here. This is the technical service name of the service. So SAP S4HANA has such names for all services. And I'm copying this one. And now this is a highlight. We made the client libraries of SAP Cloud SDK searchable and even searchable for Google. So this means that if you open a new tab and type SAP Cloud SDK and paste this service name, it's not guaranteed that it will always be the very first result, but we can see that this is actually one of the first results here. So it's not the very first, but the second and the third one. We see the second one here is the JavaScript, TypeScript documentation, and this one is for Java. So if I'm clicking the one for JavaScript now, I already see that actually I have found it here, and I can find out immediately which module this is. So it's this module here, which is the VDM activity type service. And now I know that if I need to write code that's consuming this service, I simply use this module. So this is how I find out. Very similar is for Java. If I had clicked the Google search result for the Java site, it would take me to the Java class. And of course, we are also covering the direction backwards. So if you read code written by someone else and need to find out which SAP S4HANA service exactly is invoked when you read default cost center activity type service dot something, then you can simply have a look at the Java doc or JS doc of the given service, and you will immediately find the link back to the api.sap.com page. So if I click this link here, it will take me to activity type service, which is exactly the one where I started. So this is how it works. This is how you can easily find out which Java or JavaScript class corresponds to which service of SAP S4HANA. And before concluding this, I want to show you, remember, we also offer generators for SAP Cloud SDK. We offer them for Java and JavaScript, and they allow you to generate client libraries by yourself. So going back to the API Business Hub, let's assume we want to work with success factors. So let's click success factors here. We see SAP success factors, and here are the different APIs of SAP success factors. I'm clicking just one of them, let's say Employee Central. Let's say I'm interested in compensation information service. So I'm clicking this one as well. And now I need to generate a client library for this. We have a lot of tutorials, so I will very briefly show how this works. I click on details, and I need to download the input for my SAP Cloud SDK generator so that it can generate the classes for me. And this is this button here, which is download API specification. And we see that we can download the specification in different formats. Interesting is the EDMX format, which will provide us the EDMX specification of this particular service, which is the compensation information. And now for my demo, I have downloaded two specifications. So you see here, I have two EDMX files, which is the compensation information and employee central payroll. And now I want to execute my generator for Java and for JavaScript on these services. So I want to generate two client libraries for Java, one for Java and one for JavaScript. And let's quickly do this. So this is how my directory looks like now. I have this spec directory. I have one jar file, which is my generator for Java. And I have node modules, which is my generator for JavaScript. And now I want to run both of them. Let's first start with the JavaScript side. For that, I'm executing SAP Cloud SDK, generate OData client, and provide this spec directory as input. Output will be in the JS directory. I'm running this command. It went through pretty fast. We have only two services. And what happened now is we have this JS directory here, which contains two node modules. If you don't like the names, you can adjust them by yourself. And this is exactly what I want to show. We see that in the spec directory here, it generated the file service mapping.json. This was generated by the SAP Cloud SDK, and it contains sections for every service that we generated. We generated two services. We have two EDMX files here. And here, it generated the SFO data service names for us. You can go and enter some meaningful names here. But what is more important, this is the mapping between every SAP S/4HANA service and the generated client library for that service. This is very important to understand because most likely in your project, you'll have 10 or 20 services that you generate. And then you have 10 or 20 NPM modules here. And you need to differentiate them. And you do it with this file by entering meaningful names here. Ultimately, let's do the same for Java because the principle is quite similar for Java as well. And I'm doing it for Java by invoking the jar file that I showed. And again, I'm providing the input directory, which is spec, and the output directory should be Java. I'm executing this one. It finished. And now I see that if I have a look in the Java directory, I see that it generated a Java package, which is com SAP, Cloud SDK, and so on. And important is the services package. And here I see different classes. Remember, the one was the interface, which is here, like I already showed you in the Java docs. And for this interface, we have one implementation that's prefixed with default. So for EC Employee Central Payroll, we have default EC Employee Central Payroll. And this one, of course, implements this interface. And if you wonder where the mapping file is, it got generated too, which is this properties file. You know that properties is the standard format for Java. And here you see exactly the same mapping between the S/4HANA service name and the Java class that implements the client library for this service. So this is just remember when you use the generators to look for the service mappings because they will help you a lot when you actually use what you generated. And having said that, I want to conclude for my part and hand over to Artyom. Your stage, you can start sharing.
It was amazing tutorial, Jordan. It's actually a great piece of how to, and I hope you all like this pair coding session with Jordan and how to find information about multiple SDKs that S/4HANA provides in the offering of Cloud SDK. So to give you a bit back on track of the documentation, I want to find you how to quickly contribute here. And that's actually much easier even than finding the services names in API Hub. By the way, we are looking forward to integrate with API Hub, and hopefully your process to get the client from there will be much more simplified. But so far you have to follow the path advertised by Jordan. And here, if you want to contribute to the documentation, for example, you can just go to the documentation portal, and let's say I don't know, looking into data and our brand new data before client, and you found something is not right here. You just go down here and just click edit this page, and you'll be redirected to the place to contribute. Of course, I'm part of this repository. That's why I immediately get the possibility to commit something that I would change here. So for me, it's simpler, of course. Unfortunately for you guys, but it shouldn't stop you. If we go the hard way, so you do basically the same. Let's fix our FAQ, and of course allow to see us what you want to fix. Yeah, okay. So basically, if I would be logged in with the user that doesn't have access to, like, direct access to the repository, you have an account and you logged in on GitHub, you will see the possibility to fork our repository, and then, of course, be able to update this page. Just to show you where things are. So that's incognito mode still. Give me a second. So important thing, SAP Cloud SDK, you can see in the top of the screen, is the repository where we now host our documentation. So that's the one you have to fork if you want to contribute. This is also the repository where you can give us feedback. That's actually what I wanted. So yeah, just to summarize, for contribution, you can do it directly from the documentation to find the document on the GitHub in which the contribution can happen. And then you need to make a fork, and then follow the standard process of making a pull request. And we would happily review it. So we're looking forward to have the first one from you. And of course, sometimes you would want us to give you more information about SDK, and we might be overlooking something that you urgently need to be documented. Then you can go to this issues section and just create a new issue. And the documentation issue looks like this. This is the first one, and you just can tell us here that I want very much talks on caching with Java. And please be specific, because this is quite a lot, and we already have some documentation on caching. But if you can't achieve some of the goals, or you might even see it as a shortcoming, then please come here and leave us the request. Also in this repository, you can now ask for, as a public users, of course, if you have a contract, you can use BCP ticket as a channel, but you also can come here and ask question here about the Java SDK. The template here would be a little bit heavier, because we need much more information to support you, but that's another possibility to get support and give feedback. That was, I think, quick. These slides will be shared with you so that you can see and remind yourself about the links you need to use to visit. And another important part, before that, in this SAP Cloud SDK repository, we were hosting our SDK for JavaScript. So the source code for the JavaScript SDK was in this repository. And just last week, it moved to a different repository. And this is this one. You just have to add -js. So this is where all the source code for our JavaScript SDK for those 6 modules mentioned by Jordan are living. And here you can also find support for this repository. You see, we have quite some interesting discussions here about different things that can be improved, or maybe just questions that you have and not covered with the documentation. So feel free to post your questions towards JavaScript SDK in this repository. And you can use the other one to ask questions about documentation. About documentation and Java SDK. And I think that nicely summarizes it. Please use documentation as a single point of truth for our resources. We even make a summary of tutorials for you, despite you can find it on SAP resources. We just want that you can find everything from the one place in case you need it. So just if you go to guides and need tutorials of review, you can have it from here. All the missions, please go ahead and use them. Just open up and you immediately land in the tutorials you want to use. They're also searchable from this search bar. We have some video tutorials recorded by, for example, a customer advocate of SAP and available here as well. So feel free to benefit from all the resources and learn the way you prefer. And at this point, it's probably time to say you a great thank you for staying with us and for being loyal users of Cloud SDK. We hope it works for you. I see some results in our poll. Thank you for that as well. And this is a summary slide where you can remind yourself again through which channels you can reach out to us for feedback, questions, and contributions. And on this nice note, I wish you a great evening or day or wherever you are, and hand it over to Moshe to finalize the call. Thanks a lot for joining.
Thanks a lot for a great call. I would also like to invite you to contribute and find information in the SAP community under the SAP Cloud SDK tag. The recording of the call will be available in the SAP community call page in a day or two. So thank you everyone for joining.